Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. Hey, what if I told you there was one action you could take that would cost you less than 5 minutes of your time and very little energy, but would make a world of difference for someone else? Would you do it? I hope that you would. And so today on the podcast, I'm going to encourage you to do just that. Today's episode is all about reviewing the books that you love. Imagine pouring yourself into something for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or sometimes even longer. That's what authors do to create books. They invest so much time, so much financial energy, so much creativity into these books. They spend time editing and finding readers and revising again and just making all these changes and pouring so much into these books. And then imagine having that happen for a year, 2 years, 3 years or more, sending it out into the world and then getting no reaction. Too often, I'm afraid that is what happens with authors. I want to ask you a question. How many books have you read so far this year? At the time of this recording, I have read 43 books. Now, depending on how many books you've read, that may sound really impressive or that may sound like chump change. I don't think it's going to set any world records. And I know lots of people who have read more than me. For example, my sister, as of the time of this recording, has read 84 this year, and she's going for 100. Congrats, Beck. That's awesome. But think about the number of books that you've read. Let's say you've read 20 this year. What if you left a review for half of those books? Do you think that would make an impact on the author? For sure. Are you an author or have you ever created anything? How does it feel when you get feedback, positive feedback on that work that you've created? It's pretty amazing, right? So today I want to encourage you to leave reviews. This is something that's been really new for me. I have not historically been a big reviewer of books, but I'm starting to do it because I recognize how big of an impact it can have. So let's talk about why you should leave a review on the books that you love. So first and foremost, this is going to sound so obvious coming out of the gate, but getting positive reviews makes people feel good. Are you familiar with the 5 Love Languages book from Gary Chapman? My wife and I went to a conference early on in our marriage and heard him speak and read his books. If you're not familiar, I would encourage you to check it out. It basically talks about the 5 ways that people receive love. So it's things like quality time and acts of service. And depending on what your primary love language is, you're going to receive love more acutely based on those particular things. And one of the 5 love languages, and indeed my primary love language, is words of affirmation. People love to hear positive things about themselves. But more specifically, I think people love to hear positive things about the work that they're creating. This, I believe, is especially true for those of us who are artists, those of us who are creators, who are authors or painters or people who are making things, because oftentimes the thing that you're creating, the book that you're writing, is really an extension of you, the creator. And so if you're one of those people who has words of affirmation, as your primary love language, you love to hear positive feedback on your work. Here are just a couple other reasons why I think you should review the books that you love. Number one, it helps get the word out. So the way that our world works in 2024, when this is being recorded, everything these days seems to be based on algorithms. So everything online, the more positive reviews something gets, the more that website or that company or that algorithm will promote that thing. So the more positive reviews are left on a book, the more it kind of bubbles up to the surface and more readers can experience it. And don't we do this in our normal life anyway? If you go out to, let's say, a really nice restaurant and you really enjoy the service and the quality of the food and the atmosphere, and someone talks to you the next day and says, hey, what did you do this weekend? You're going to talk about this restaurant that you love. You're going to say, hey, we went to this really cool spot downtown. It was such good food. And you're going to promote that thing, right? Why wouldn't we do the same thing with the books that we're reading? Now, maybe you're already doing that. If you are, awesome. Please keep doing it. I think it's so important. It helps get the word out and it can also increase sales. So if you're like me, if you go on Amazon to purchase a product, you are the type of person who likes to read the reviews. I want to see at minimum what is the 5-star rating of this thing. But specifically, oftentimes, I want to get down into the weeds, into the reviews and see what did people like about this product? What did they not like about it? Where does it have shortcomings? Where does it not quite fit the billing? And does it meet the need that I, the consumer, am looking for? And oftentimes, if I'm on the fence, it's a review that's going to inform whether or not I actually end up making that purchase. Readers of books are the same way. So if you leave a positive review, people are more likely to see that star rating when they're out searching for a book. And if they read your positive words, they're more likely to take your word for it. And if they're on the fence, they'll go ahead and buy that book. So, reason number one why I think you should review the books you love, it helps get the word out and it can increase sales if those consumers happen to be on the fence. Number two, I think it actually makes you feel better. I think that kindness begets kindness, encouragement begets encouragement, and positivity begets positivity. So the more positive you are, the more encouraging you are in your life, the more likely you are to be experiencing positive feelings, positive encouragement. It just kind of goes to follow that as your mindset is focused on these positive things, more positive things will happen in your life. So it really is a win-win. Reason number three, and I mentioned this at the open, it doesn't take you much time at all. Most of the websites and apps nowadays make it fairly easy for people to leave ratings and reviews. All you have to do is go down and hit the star or the number scale, type a few sentences, doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering, but just tell other people why you like that thing. And it can make that 5 minutes of your time can have an incredibly positive impact on the person who created it. So those are the reasons why I think you should leave a review. Here's some rules on how you should read reviews. And so I've got a few of these. And by the way, I know this is a podcast. And so when I say rules, I want you to recognize that, like, hey, you can do whatever you want, but these are best practices that I have started to put in place because I think this is a pretty thoughtful and intentional way to review the books that you love. So here's some advice from me. Number one, read books, right? It stands to reason that if you're going to review a book, you've got to read it. Reading is probably in my top 5. If I had a list of all my favorite things to do, reading is probably in my top 5. I had a couple of guests on my podcast recently who talked about reading as such an important tool for people who are writers. Because as you read and read widely, you're able to pick up on things like dialogue and flow and storyline. And so if you're a creator yourself, reading and reading widely can help inform the way that you create. But also, again, just kind of logically, you can't review a book that you've never read. So number one, my advice, read. It is such a good thing for you. It's a good thing for authors. It's a good thing for the world, frankly. And with all the technology and the rapid pace that technology is advancing nowadays, reading has become somewhat of a lost art. But I'm teaching my kids, and I hope to encourage you, read as much as you can. I heard someone say recently, especially when it comes to nonfiction, people take their lifelong journey of learning and finding expertise in a certain thing, packing it into 200 pages and selling it to you for $11. Like, that is the cheapest and best education you can get, is reading nonfiction books, but also immersing yourself in great stories in fiction is it's just good for our souls. So read great books and be generous with your reviews. Number two, read local independent authors. Now, that doesn't mean you can't read the big commercial guys. John Grisham is one of my favorite authors. I've read pretty much everything that he's put out, and I will continue to do that. But I have loved lately reading smaller authors, reading local authors, people who are maybe just starting out, who aren't as widely known. Maybe your local bookstore or your local library has a local author section. Browse those shelves, find those authors and read them. Bonus points if it's someone who you already know. So one of the books that I read recently is by a guy named Frank Reddy. I connected with him on Instagram. He and I have kind of become friends a little bit, and he shared one of his books. I read it, really enjoyed it. And then secondly, I was on a vacation with my wife not too long ago. We were on an anniversary trip. And as we were coming home, we stopped at a store, and the proprietor was also an author and had a stack of his books for sale at the counter. And so on the way home, I picked up a book. It's by a guy named A.D. Haywood. It's called The Promise of Tomorrow. Really great story. And I would have had no idea about this guy or his book if I didn't happen to intersect his path there. And so read local authors, read independent authors. It's not just the big box names, the big names that you see on the big lists that write great books. It's also some more independent, more local folks as well. Advice number 3 on reviewing the books that you love: be honest. I am certainly not encouraging you to just make up a review. If you didn't really like a book, I'm not asking you to leave 5 stars. In fact, and this will be point number 4, if you didn't like a book, maybe don't review that one. Maybe find the ones that you love, and those are the ones that you invest spending your time on. I would say definitely don't fabricate your reviews, but certainly don't leave an unnecessarily unkind one either. A podcast I listened to not too long ago, one of the hosts encouraged listeners at the end of the show to leave a, quote, honest 5-star review. And I love that. Like, he's not shying away from saying, hey, I want you to leave a positive review on this thing, but definitely be honest, which leads into point number 4, advice number 4 for leaving reviews on the books that you love. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. This, by the way, is advice that I got from my mom when I was a very young child, and it's advice that I think is relevant to any arena of life. Praise publicly and criticize privately. So if you think someone just wrote the greatest story ever, put that out on the internet. Let the world know. Send in that 5-star review and tell that author how much you enjoyed their work. But if it wasn't your favorite, or if you felt like they had an opportunity to really shape the story in a different way, maybe that's something where you direct message them, or you send them an email, or maybe it's not worth saying at all. Remember, the goal with any of this is to build people up. It should never be to tear people down. And so if you have something constructive to offer that you think really, truly will be helpful for that author, go ahead and send it to them privately. But if it's just a critique, if it's just you're just trying to trash someone else's work, maybe keep that to yourself. Framework that you can think about in this scenario is, and this is not original to me either, this is also a mom original, but she used to always ask us as kids, hey, before you say something, consider, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? And if you can't say yes to all of those questions, maybe it's not something that's meant to be said. So advice number 4, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Remember, always praise publicly and criticize privately. And my last piece of advice for reviewing the books that you love is that online reviews are fantastic and necessary. But often what holds even more weight can be a personal recommendation to a friend. And so one of the questions that I always like to ask when I'm catching up with someone I haven't seen in a while, hey, what are you reading these days? I've got a friend, Evan, who I see pretty frequently, and he and I are exchanging ideas of books that we're reading. And he'll loan me a book that he's read. I'll loan him a book that I've read. And so it's just a cool way to talk about where you're learning and what things you're experiencing. Ask people what books they're reading. And when someone asks you, definitely share some of those that you've really enjoyed. Again, it's just such a big deal to get the word out and encourage more people to read more great books. A couple more things to highlight on today's episode. So many of the people who are listening to this show are going to be writers or creators of some sort. You are going to experience some reviews of your own. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Anyone who creates anything and publishes it out to the wide world is going to experience reviews. And in fact, we are probably all going to experience negative reviews at some point. So here's how you should think about it when you receive a negative review. And again, I said when, not if, because anyone who creates and puts themselves out there is subject to critique. And as Taylor Swift says, the hater's gonna hate, 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 hate. So number 1, if you receive a negative review, when you receive a negative review, don't take it personally. I know that can be easier said than done. But remember that the person who's leaving that review, they may have all kinds of reasons for leaving it, but ultimately they're critiquing your book, not you as a person. So as hard as it might be, try not to take it personally. It's not a direct attack on you. Number 2, if you receive a negative review, celebrate. This means that people are reading your book, and people beyond just your immediate circle of family and friends. If you're able to get that first negative review, you can recognize that, hey, this thing is being read and sold widely. And number 3, where it's possible, take learnings from that feedback. Sometimes people will offer critiques. Again, if you're not taking it personally, you're celebrating the fact that your book's being read, you can maybe detach yourself from some of the emotion of reading that negative review after a while. And maybe there's opportunity for you to learn and grow. Always be looking for those opportunities. They do exist even in those painful negative reviews. Okay, so recap of today's episode: review the books you love. There's so many good reasons to do it, but the biggest one is that people love to hear that the work they're doing, the thing that they're pouring themselves into, is having an impact. It takes less than 5 minutes of your time to leave a positive review, but it can make a world of difference for someone else. As far as advice for leaving reviews, you got to read books. I would encourage you to read local independent authors. Be honest and be kind. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And one of the best ways you can review something positively is to share it via word of mouth with friends and family. And if you happen to receive negative reviews, rather, when you receive a negative review, don't take it personally. Celebrate that your book's being read and take whatever learnings you can. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. But hey, and if you want to put this into practice today, here's a way you can do it, because this is not just limited to books. Rate and review this podcast. Go to the bottom of your podcast app today. Leave me your honest 5-star review. Tell me what you love about the podcast. And hey, share it with somebody close to you. Later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.